Welcome to Chapter 2. This chapter we will be discussing stakeholder relationships, social responsibility, and corporate governance. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to identify stakeholders' roles in business ethics, define social responsibility, examine the relationship between stakeholder orientation and social responsibility, delineate a stakeholder orientation in creating CSR, explore the role of corporate governance in structuring ethics and social responsibility in business, list the steps involved in implementing a stakeholder perspective in social responsibility and business ethics. Relationships in business, they go hand in hand just like relationships in your personal life. You're associated with both organizational success and misconduct, right? The plus and the minus. Businesses exist because of organizational relationships between our stakeholders. Those are our employees, our customers, our shareholders, and the community at large. And our framework is identified by the internal and external shareholders who agree, collaborate, and engage in confrontations on ethical issues. It allows our organization to identify, monitor, and respond to the needs and expectations of the individual groups who are directly and indirectly impacted by the actions that we take within the organization of one or more employees or the company as a whole. So our stakeholders, those are those who have a stake or claim in some aspect of the operations, markets, and industry of the company. And our approach to stakeholder theory is we have our normative, descriptive, instrumental. Normative, we set forth our guidelines that dictate how organizations should treat stakeholders. Descriptive focuses on the behavior that we actually display within an organization and addresses how decisions and strategies should be made for our relationships with stakeholders. Instrumental describes what happens if an organization behaves a certain way. The role that we play as stakeholders can foster decision making. The level of our responsibility of an organization can be assessed by scrutinizing the effects it has on certain issues of concern to internal and external stakeholders. And we can provide resources that are critical to our long-term success as an organization. As I mentioned earlier, we have two types of stakeholders, primary and secondary. So that's internal and external. Our primary stakeholders, also called internal stakeholders, are those whose support and resources are needed for our organization to survive. Those are our employees, our customers, and our shareholders, which are also considered your investors. Your secondary stakeholders, which are your external stakeholders, don't necessarily engage directly with you transactionally, and they're not essential to your success. Those could be the media, trade associations, government, so on and so forth. Here is a diagram, figure 2.2, where you can see the interactions. So on the outside, which are your the secondary, your external, right? Your external stakeholders. Yes, your competitors are also considered stakeholders. The decisions that you make positively and negatively can positively or negatively impact your competitor. And you see the entry point there with them are through your suppliers. You can block a competitor from having a contract with or access to or territory within based on the relationship you form with the supplier and vice versa. Trade associations, special interest groups, and the mass media can also impact your organization, and you can see the ways in which they can reach into the portals in which they can reach. Then you have your customers, employees, shareholders, suppliers, community, and government regulatory agencies that directly have an impact relationship with your organization on varying degrees, of course. But your very, very, very most primary stakeholder are your customers, your employees, and your shareholders, also considered your investors. So stakeholder orientation is the degree in which your organization understands and addresses the demands of each stakeholder. And there's various activities that are involved in that. You can have an organization-wide generation of data about those individual groups, and then you can assess the effects that your organization has on these individual groups. You can distribute that data throughout the organization, and then the responsiveness of the organization to the data as it's generated can help you then see how it's rolled out and reinforced, both short-term and long-term. Figure 2.3 shows you the steps of CSR. You have your economic, which is focused on maximizing the wealth and or value of your stakeholders. Legal is making sure you're abiding all the laws and the government regulations. Ethical is that you're following the standards of acceptable behavior as judged by stakeholders, both internal and external. And philanthropic is how you're giving back to society, the same society that keeps you in business and allows you to be in their cities and neighborhoods and countries. So corporate citizenship is the degree in which a business will strategically meet the economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic responsibilities placed on them by internal and external stakeholders. Those dimensions are broken down by our strong, sustained economic performance, how rigorous we are in being compliant, the ethical actions beyond what the law requires. So are you going above and beyond what's expected by law? Your voluntary contributions that advance the reputation and stakeholder commitment of the organization. Remember, reputation is key. It precedes you. Before someone gets to meet you, they go based on what was said about you. So there's various issues that you deal with the CSR. Social issues, consumer protection, sustainability, corporate governance. When you think of, and let me just back up. To back up really quick, when you think of various social issues that you as an organization should be concerned about, it could be things that are civil human rights issues. You can talk about, you can consider the fact when you're dealing with the relationship between police and community and your role within the community, right? Because you are a major player in that as far as your organization and your relationship that you can help to build bridges within that. For one example, is one thing that we look upon as a social responsibility. That's just one. Another issue can be domestic violence. It can be issues from human trafficking. There's so many different ways in which we can address social issues from a corporate standpoint. The importance of this orientation in CSR is we have these different viewpoints. Friedman's view is that stakeholders don't have any role in requiring businesses to demonstrate responsible and ethical behavior, while Adam Smith believes that there's an organization should adopt to produce in a more socially responsible way correlates with the needs and concerns of the stakeholders. And so stakeholder support for organizations that are socially responsible and actually enhances your profitability. We look at corporate governance and stakeholders, and the governance provides a formalized responsibility to stakeholders. You have your directors and officers of corporations who they have fiduciary responsibility for all shareholders, and they perform a duty of diligence and share a duty of loyalty for that organization, but also for stakeholders in the community at large, right? Because you can invest all you want. If consumers are not buying the product or service, you don't have a company. Additionally, accountability is the degree in which you make decisions that align with your goals and compliance with ethical and legal considerations factored in. And you will go about establishing systems and processes that help prevent and detect misconduct, investigate and discipline those responsible for being involved in misconduct, and recovery and continuous improvement, so that you can evolve your system and the processes to be more strengthened and unified and established throughout your organization. And there's a development of a stakeholder orientation that should interface with your governance structure. So there's different models. You have your shareholder model where the goal is to maximize wealth for investors and owners. And that focuses on developing and improving the formal system for maintaining performance accountability between top management and shareholders. This is also called like the stockholder model, those that own stocks in. And then your stakeholder, that's the reason why the name has been altered from stockholder to shareholder. And your stakeholder model is a company where it answers to all stakeholders, internally and externally. You're promoting the welfare of your stakeholders along with making sure that your corporate needs and interests are met. Your board of directors are responsible for the ethics of your actions. They have a fiduciary responsibility. They have to assume ultimate authority for the effectiveness and performance of the organization, and they're governed by the amendments of the FSGO. There's a demand for accountability and transparency that goes beyond your internal organization. It is coming from the community, from your customers as well, where directors today are being selected based on their expertise, their competence, their ability to bring diverse perspectives to strategic discussions to address major concerns. And so having outside directors that don't have vested interests, that don't have controlling interest in the organization, that there's no undue influence given by them onto the organization or by the organization upon them. And the concept allows there to be an interlocking directorate that's not illegal unless it involves a direct competitor, right? And what that means is that you have board members that can be linked to more than one company, but if they are linked to one of your direct competitors, that's a conflict of interest. It doesn't make any sense. That person is then being a double agent. Can't work. Executive compensation. This is a huge factor because we're looking at more and more companies where your top executives are paid these huge salaries, and the ratio between the highest paid executive and the median employee wage is really huge, but it should be much less. And so stakeholders support high level of compensation only when it's linked to a strong company performance, but based on certain characteristics, because oftentimes compensation based on performance in the past has been based on smoke and mirrors, in the fact that you can tweak it and that, oh, well, look how well we did, but it was based on one quarter or maybe 2 quarters, but it wasn't based over the entire year. And it wasn't really based on the efforts of the executive, but more so the efforts of their median to low rung level employee. So there's some factors that are always considered in that as well. Steps that you can use to implement a stakeholder perspective is making sure that you assess the corporate culture, knowing that culture always begins at the top. It always starts with your senior leaders. It starts with that CEO, the president, the COO. Identify your various groups and the issues that they have. Assess your commitment to being social responsible. Identify the resources that you have and determine the urgency that you need to engage and implement them. And then, of course, constantly getting feedback from your internal and external stakeholders. So that is chapter 2 in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please email me. Thank you.